Good afternoon. I think I know everybody, but if you don't know me, I'm Jeff Cox. The purpose of we had one of these meetings a few weeks ago, and of this one is really to listen to what all of you had to say about where we are in this large conversation that has taken on the alphabetical title of ICJMT. Involves all sorts of interesting possibilities for the campus. If the last session we had hoped to largely hear from the faculty. It largely ended up being questions. I'm happy to try to answer questions people have, but we're more interested in hearing what you have to say. I can provide two quick updates. As I hope you're aware, there was a call just a few weeks ago for curricular or program proposals in this large area that we've been talking about for the last 2 years, with particularly looking for ideas about things we could deliver under current structures or deliver under new structures. We got a good group of proposals. We tried to fund as many of them as we could, and we've got a good group of faculty out there working on what I think are some very intriguing ideas. We will, now that I think we're settled, I think we've got everything. There was some back and forth with some of the proposals asking for some revisions and so on. We'll post the titles and the faculty groups for the proposals that received funding, and we'll be gathering, we hope all of them, but at least representatives from each of the groups in a week or so, just so they can talk to each other about what they're doing, because there was some overlap on the ideas that they had, and I think that some of these groups could talk to each other in a productive way, but that'll be up to them. So these will be independent faculty groups out there working on these proposals that are due into the provost at the beginning of the spring semester. We're also very close, but it will probably still be early November before we can release the names of the external review team. Andre Grota, who handles program review, has been doing a heroic effort of trying to bring in 7 extremely prominent, very busy people in for the same block of dates, which now looks like the middle of February. But as soon as all that is finalized, we'll release the dates and the names of the review team and the charge to the review team, and then we'll be soliciting ideas on meeting structures and so on. So when you see that, if there's a group that you feel needs to be meeting with those reviewers, you should let us know. I think that's all there is by way of updates, so just open the floor for your comments or whatever else you want to say. Yeah.
So, a lot of discussion has developed around the arts, and so I'm very excited about the possibility of how we can take the arts forward even further on this campus, where we really have made a lot of investments, and yet there's a lot more that could be made for the excellence in education. So I have been particularly interested in, could we expand our museum studies program, which is right now museum and field studies and very much focused on the sciences, and is also housed in the graduate school as opposed to the art museum, which is in the college and currently doesn't have a museum studies program associated with it. And I just wanted to have that formally reflected to you and to whoever might view these videotapes. I'm interested in curatorial studies, museum studies, and then Helmut is also interested in archive studies. There's some interesting overlaps of those spheres, also distinct qualities of those. But, we've had discussions and I don't know exactly what's percolating up, so I really wanted to share that.
I appreciate that there was a team that proposed something in the area, and maybe not quite as broadly defined as you'd suggested. We did suggest they talk to others, because I know this was one of the things that came out of the conversations you all held this past summer in the arts and humanities. So it's certainly something that people are looking at.
Session at 3 o'clock.
So it seems to me that if CU wants to move its good programs to level of excellence, with the resources we have, at some stage, some programs have to see their resources removed. And I hope that the outside people coming in are going to consider as part of their charge the idea that it would be better to use the resources being planned for this program to move programs that are in the top 20 AUP that are, within sight of achieving excellence and actually move them to excellence. And it can't be done if our resources are scattered in a way that really few or nobody really achieves that highest level.
But we're not talking about no new resources, are we?
Well, so part of the question is what's the charge to the outside community? I'm not writing the charge, so I don't. But thank you for making the suggestion. It depends what one means by no new resources. But I believe that if we are going to move forward in this area, though I don't make these decisions, that this would be part of the university's planned, not very large, but still important increase in the size of the campus, so that there is a planned expansion of the student body, which of course now is the major way in which we bring new resources to the campus. So the presumption would be is if we create a new set of options that we're not offering now, or they're configured in a different way and offer new, exciting ways in for students, that we'll be able to bring students to campus that were not currently here, that is, that we're not just shuffling dollars around. There's larger conversations going on campus, which I'm not a part, about where the campus is going to expand in terms of its enrollments. So it's not as if these conversations aren't occurring. And again, putting on my arts and humanities hat, I always, or for that matter, my media, journalism, communication hat, I always think it's important for those parts of the campus to be getting proposals forward to be heard, because there's certainly other people that are out there saying they would be happy to have additional resources to expand their operations. So the simple answer would be, if I were making a decision, which again, I don't, I run the process, I don't make the decisions, I wouldn't do this if there weren't new resources. It just wouldn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, I guess I'd just pick up on that and say that change may offer us a possibility with the potential of being more entrepreneurial than we have been in the past, and that picking up on the idea of attracting new students. I mean, with new configurations, and not just a new ICJMT configuration, but there's a whole other initiative that's sort of taking place now around environment and sustainability, and there are certainly ways to connect those two things, and all sorts of new ways to perhaps bring in new students and professional master's programs, et cetera, and bring in new revenue.
Yeah. And that, that certainly would be the smart way, I think, if we were doing this. Again, I mean, I think that the desire on the campus has been to try to get the intellectual work done, the kind of educational and academic work done before adding up the dollar signs or arguing over bylaw structures. But I think we're rapidly getting to a point where we've got a lot of ideas on the table, and then we need to start figuring out how we can make them work. Yeah, Graham?
Just following up on the same area. So some years ago, I think it was 2009, you did the first of these RPAC-sponsored cluster reviews, and you put a lot of effort into making proposals for ways of improving and expanding and investing in the arts and humanities. A couple of those, partly thanks to you, did get funded. Some of the graduate, particularly I think here, particularly the graduate fellowship changes, but I've been a little bit out of it, so I'm not entirely sure what's happened, but I don't think any of the proposals have moved forward. So I think a lot of us are a little bit puzzled as to why, we've got this, let's be honest, we've got this failed journalism program. Why it's failed, I don't know the details, I don't really want to find out. But it failed in a massive way. And now it seems like resources are going to be plowed in to save that instead of the very good proposals that you led a whole bunch of activities to come up. We're kind of puzzled by that.
So, again, I run a set of processes. I don't make decisions, but to explain what happened. So when we revised the program review process, and I think, as somebody who's been centrally involved, and I think the revisions have been good and have been interesting, but of course they coincided with the end of regular budgeting processes. So there has been no regular budgeting process run out of academic affairs since the year of that review. So the design of the program review changes was to say that when program review made budget recommendations, that as you all know, if you had been involved in this in the past, when recommendations were made, they came in two flavors. There were recommendations to departments: clean up your bylaws, fix your introductory course, stop beating your assistant professors. And then there were recommendations to deans in the campus: add 5 more lines, give them a new building, so on and so on. And in the past, only departments were required to respond, so the departments fixed their bylaws, revised their introductory course, and the recommendations on budgeting matters were thrown in the trash can. So one of the things we changed was that the deans and the provost have to respond to the budgetary recommendations that come out of our PAC. So in the case of the arts and humanities, all those went forward to the dean, and they're now actually in the hands of the provost and part of that cycle. And the dean's office quite appropriately said, we have no money to fund any of these proposals, because they had no money. We did manage to secure, outside the budgeting process, just through a lobbying effort with the vice chancellor for budget, we did manage to get funding for the pilot program with research associates in 3 humanities departments that Graham's referring to. But there was no budget distribution that year or in any subsequent year that's been controlled by academic affairs. That does not mean there aren't monies flowing around campus. It's just not flowing through the budgeting process. The Academic Affairs Budget Advisory Committee has not held budget hearings since that time. So there's, that's just a fact of what's happened with program review. So in terms of what would happen in this particular area, there obviously are resources that are available, and as Helmut suggests, there could be new resources, but journalism produces large amounts of money. To just take the piece of the pie that you referred to directly, and journalism has a robust undergraduate student body. They produce student credit hours. I mean, that would be part, if they were part of a new entity, that would be part of the funding base for a new entity. So I think that what we'd be looking at is a combination of resources we have and the new resources that could be secured by expanding our student base. And Tom's right, the same would have to be true if we were to move forward around issues of the environment and sustainability. But I think that what, and there were aspects of particularly the Arts and Humanities Review that actually touched on some of the issues that we've been talking about since then. And I think that in broader terms, that partially coming out of program review, but also coming from other processes, including the process around journalism, the campus is trying to decide if, and if so, how you can stake out a major presence in what are clearly two major areas of intellectual concern and also social concern. So one's around environment and sustainability. The other is around this much less clearly defined or perhaps just much more contested set of terms, which is why we use the alphabet soup. But in some ways what we're talking about is what are we doing with changes around the environment in environmental science, environmental studies, environmental policy, and what are we doing around media largely understood, information largely understood, technological changes. Those seem to be two major things going on in the world that maybe universities should respond to. Lots of our peer institutions are making major changes in the way they do business in order to respond to these areas. And so all the campus has done is invited the faculty to have that conversation. And at the end of the day, we have to make a decision about whether these are important things for us to do. And if they are, then it becomes the work of the campus to figure out how to do it. Or we can say, no, we don't care about that stuff. That would be, that is a possible outcome of these conversations.
I don't want to get lost in the weeds or disrupt the conversation, but if you'd like to sit down and actually have a conversation about journalism, I'd be happy to do that. I think your characterization of it as being failed in the very strong terms that you use is really inaccurate and unfair. And I'd love to have coffee with you to tell you some of the things that we're doing that are actually leaders internationally. So be happy to do that.
I was just commenting on the fact that it was closed down.
Yeah.
Right. Well, it wasn't.
I think unfortunately the impression was left through the media because of the fact that the regions insist we call this reorganization process discontinuance. And it's not, you guys are still here, I believe. And again, without getting too far into it, I do think we've seen some exciting stuff happening before, but also since then, the News Corps, which I know just some about, it just seems like a really wonderful new development.
Yeah, and again, I hear those two priorities, and where the arts fit with that, which were brought into this, is unclear to me, because if we look at our peers, they also have not only in the past, but are continuing to dynamically invest in the arts. So I don't know if there's a way that we can, with more commitment to the term the arts, add that to this picture that, would make it, I think, that much more dynamic and exciting. So if we're talking about environmental design, yes, we could be talking about engineering and material science, but ceramics overlaps with this one example that was given of an adobe brick, but it also is a kind of material science. Many of our peers have College of Fine Arts, they have College of Art and Architecture, they have College of Art, Architecture and Media, they have College of Fine and Applied Arts. They have all different words like this, but that's one thing I would love to see, because it's not in ICJMT, even in the ABCs of it.
Yeah. Well, so I think you're putting your finger on something, which was this, that I think that everyone was somewhat surprised when the faculty committee charged with listening to the discussion groups and coming out with a report moved to a bold vision that included combining arts units along with other units. And obviously, had we thought that's where we're going to end up, we would have added arts into the original alphabet soup. I think that I shouldn't speak for the provost, but in this case, I think I will. I think that when it happened, I think the provost saw this as an opportunity to have the conversation that you're calling for, Lisa, which is that I've repeatedly heard deans, a slew of provosts, and different chancellors all say we need to do more for the arts, that sometimes also include the humanities in that. And yet no one has had very concrete ideas about, other than saying, well, we need a lot more money, which is what everybody on campus says. There have not been a lot of concrete ideas about what that would mean. So the hope is, independent of whatever administrative structure we create or do not create at the end of this conversation, that one of the things that this conversation should trigger is a serious questioning of what our investment in the arts. What are we willing to do for the arts if we want the arts to be prominent? And what's the best way to do that? And, thanks to efforts of many people in this room with Helmut's group this summer, brought the humanities into that discussion as well, which had not really been part of the ICJMT bit, other than that they said they wanted a broad liberal arts education, but trying to give some meat to what that might mean. So if I were sitting in the audience, would I be looking at this process as an opportunity to come forward with some exciting ideas, and exciting ideas that maybe fit within some kind of new administrative structure, but maybe don't, but with the general goal of trying to direct the campus's attention to the vital work that is being done in this range of units under conversation, which are not the units that we talk about most often, right? I mean, we have spent this week celebrating another Nobel Prize on campus. We know where a lot of the attention resides. Here's an opportunity to have the ear of kind of everybody on campus to say, what kinds of stuff can we do? Sir?
I see an opportunity here, but I also see a risk. And the risk is that a lot of these programs might lose their autonomy as if they're rolled into this one big thing. Has that been voiced before by any faculty members?
Well, sure, and I guess, you know, my only question when that's raised is all academic units that are in multi-unit schools or colleges are already rolled into one big thing. Now, if you're in the law school, you get to act as an independent law school, and you don't really have to worry about what anybody else does. If you know, but the College of Arts and Sciences already has German professors next to physics professors, next to economics professors, next to art history professors, next to theater practitioners. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people rolled into one thing. In engineering, there's a whole bunch of different engineering disciplines rolled into one place. Reconfiguring academic departments in different alignments doesn't change the fact that we have to get along with people in other areas. Even if you're in a law school, you're still part of a university, and you hope that you're, you know, in conversation. You're certainly in competition for resources. So certainly it could be done badly, and certainly if, you know, as somebody who kind of, from, you know, I like to talk about interdisciplinary as much as the next person, but believes that interdisciplinary is based on disciplinary strengths. If somebody suddenly said we should have an amalgamated faculty taking people from 12 different places on campus and all putting them in one tenure-bearing unit, that wouldn't make sense to me. Again, I don't make decisions, but if anybody asked my opinion, I would say that's not the way to do it. But are there better configurations of units, of relationships between units that we could have in the future than we have now? I think that's an important question to ask. It's a question that's being asked at a different level, as I understand it, inside the College of Arts and Sciences. I mean, I'm, you know, stranded off there on the edge of campus and only hear things when carrier pigeons land in the atrium of Regent Hall. But the conversation about school reorganization within the college is a different kind of conversation about reorganizing the way in which we do business. So I think those are always good conversations to have. Always understanding that the conversation could end with the decision, hey, we figured it out. We don't, you know, things are good the way we're doing it. But if we look around the country, I think we see all sorts of people reorganizing things. Now, sometimes those reorganizations are made for bad reasons. They're sometimes made for budget cutting reasons. So we've got a distinguished speaker at 3 o'clock this afternoon whose department was combined into a group of departments at McGill, and largely to save money. That's not what this conversation is about. This conversation is not about combining units to cut budgets. If things are combined and reorganized, it will be, as Helmut suggests, to increase resources. There's no reason to do it otherwise. You know, there's no design on anybody's budget, and there's no reason to go through all the effort to just, you know, move chairs around. I mean, there's a real desire to do something that's going to be interesting.
Thanks. I think your point is well taken, but I think as I read the ICJMT, it's clear that additional resources are called for and may be available, but it feels like they will go to a specific purpose. And that those of us who work in areas for which it would be a real stretch to call it media, we will suffer. Those of us who work in what one of my colleagues called the live moment, where media, we are far, far removed from the concept of media, even in the very broadest terms. So I wonder if you could speak to that. Is within the College of Arts and Sciences, yes, we are odd bedfellows, but we do have a fair amount of autonomy in how we operate. It feels like this new college proposal has a specific agenda behind it, and those of us who don't fit within that agenda might suffer in terms of resources.
Well, a couple of things. I mean, one, we could have a nice conversation about the relationship between performance and mediation and remediation. As somebody who studies drama, I mean, we use these terms all the time. But setting aside kind of really interesting intellectual argument and getting to the concerns. So, again, we can't say this too often enough. The steering committee's ICJMT report was a faculty committee that listened to people who spoke to it and wrote a report that is now sparking further conversations. It is not a design of a school or a college that anyone has endorsed. So it is not as if tomorrow there's, the list of units that they have indicated are going to be put together. So you raise a good question. So there may be arts units that belong connected with this kind of operation. There may be arts units that don't. There may be aspects of arts. You're obviously here with Colorado Shakespeare Festival. That's a unique kind of entity on campus, and to my mind, is a campus asset that's funding should be decided separately from the conversations about how we think about the funding of academic units that are delivering degrees and delivering. I mean, it's just a different kind of creature. So, again, if I were deciding and somebody said, in order to fund this cool new idea, we have to close down the Colorado Shakespeare Festival, that wouldn't be an appealing idea to me, and not something that I've ever heard anybody even remotely suggest. But I think, going back to the key question is, I think you do raise a question about, so we got to at some point decide kind of what belongs and what doesn't belong. Mm-hmm. And there've got to be, and the default position is probably not to change rather than change. Universities are very conservative institutions. So what are the advantages of reorganizing? And by advantages, and what are the intellectual advantages, what are the educational advantages, and then we hope also resource advantages, but certainly not resource disadvantages.
Thank you.
So I just wanted to respond to your point. I'm in the Department of Art and Art History, and we've actually had those discussions and that concern. And ours has been primarily around that our students and our faculty actually go out into the much broader arts and sciences college and work with a variety of different departments, whether it's in humanities or in the social sciences or sometimes in sciences. And we're concerned that a possible move would move us from a lot of that diversity that we have educationally. So just so you know, some of the conversations have been happening. But you might have said this already, so I apologize if I'm asking this and I totally am overlooking it. But the RFPs that were solicited, have those been posted so that we can, I know that there are groups that are being organized and there's probably some sort of finessing that's going on with the language, but I would be really interested to read those RFPs because I understand they've been approved, correct?
So we're going to post the names of the proposals that were funded and the faculty members. So we're not posting all the.
But none of the actual text.
Yeah, I mean it's.
Will that be available upon request?
I would request it from the individual faculty members. I mean, just because we had a very tight timeline for people to meet. I'm not sure the work product in these cases were always what our colleagues would be the happiest with, and we didn't ask for people to sit down and rewrite things. That's just a waste of time. But when people, there were clearly proposals that left out partners that were quite clearly would be good partners for them to have. So we kind of said, yes, we'd love to fund this, but we'd also like you to go talk to these people. And as soon as they let us know that, if we had known about that, we would have done it. Then we've gone ahead. And as I say, we're going to have some kind of meeting where we're going to try to bring people together to talk about this. We couldn't fund everything. We tried to fund as much as we could scare up the resources for, and it's a pretty. It's a pretty broad base of ideas, and I think some exciting stuff. And there's stuff that came out of arts units. There's stuff that came out of things that would say more in the kind of communications, mass communications area. There's stuff that came out of journalism. There's stuff that involves science. There are some connections into engineering. It's quite diverse. And we do know that this will give us some good ideas from which to think about the future, but there's stuff that we didn't get that we would need. So assuming that that technology means anything in all this, there would need to be some kind of technological base provided for these students. So we're going to need to turn to our friends in electrical engineering, computer science for some base courses for students. So there's no small amount of work to be done. But I think this was, I was impressed with, I was pretty excited by the ideas that people came up with. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one of your arguments for this investing in this area strikes me as interesting, namely that this would help attract more students to the university, more tuition-paying students. From my point of view, that isn't a defect, at least of the humanities or my department. I'm just at a quick calculation now, and I'm teaching enough students this semester to not only generates about $500,000 in tuition. So it not only pays my salary, but probably pays also the salary of somebody in Region Board. I've never had a shortage of students, and it doesn't strike me that telling the humanities we've got to do this to attract more students is very plausible. What seems to me to be the problem is the current distribution of money in the university. I mean, we're subsidising law, engineering, and other units. Now, I don't mind cross-subsidisation, but this particular argument doesn't strike me as a good one for going here. We can get students into the front door in all sorts of ways, including, for example, increasing the prestige of the current humanities departments or the humanities and the arts.
So I don't think anybody began with the idea that the goal was to increase the number of students. Just in response to the question about how would you find new resources, we are a tuition-driven university now, so that's where you find your resources. We just opened up the program review for the social sciences, who pointed out that they subsidize everybody, and they believe they subsidize the arts and humanities. So everybody believes they subsidize somebody else. What we do know is that there are certain operations on campus that require subsidies. That's why you have a university, and instead of having independent we could have a freestanding college of music, a freestanding law school, and say, you guys, raise your own money and keep all your own money. That's an extreme version of responsibility-centered management. Not a vision of university that I find appealing, but it's again, that is a conversation that's occurring. There is a conversation about changing budgeting models towards a responsibility-centered managed budget, or every tub on its own bottom. Essentially, people generate and keep their resources. Of course, the question is what level do you drive that kind of funding basis to? Do you say every school and college must raise its own money? Do you say every department must raise its own money? If you've looked online in Texas, my former institution at Texas A&M, they do exactly the operation you were doing mentally, Graham, which is, does each faculty member generate his or her own salary from a combination of tuition dollars and indirect cost recoveries? And so should each of us be making our own salary on the basis of what we do? These are serious questions. I don't think they're unique to this conversation. I think that's just part of the question about the way in which we are going to conceive of ourselves as a joint communal operation.
How we think about I wasn't suggesting moving to every faculty member float on his own bottom, because a lot of them would sink. I'm not suggesting that at all. What I'm saying is that as an argument for investing in this area as opposed to other areas, it's not a good argument. So there are all sorts of ways we could attract better and more students to the university.
Okay. Well, anybody would like to hear what they are?
I have a question about the funding as proposed in the first proposal that came. Towards the end of that the first long ICJMT proposal, there was a page or two about where funding would come from. And among the possible sources of funding was the World Bank and the Department of Homeland Security. And I wonder how that would impact the mission of the journalism school if it was funded by the Department of Homeland Security or World Bank.
I can't answer for journalists, but I can't say the authors of the report regret having. They were just trying to list the kinds of areas in which people with this expertise work. But
So has that been retracted?
well, I mean, it's not. I mean, the report is the report. The report's out there. But I think if you want to talk to the people on the committee, what they did not mean was that we should turn over the campus to the World Bank. I think there's always a
journalism because
yeah. Well, they can speak for themselves. But I'd just say, there's all sorts of funding on campus that comes from all sorts of government and private sources, and I think we're always concerned to make sure that independence of intellectual work occurs, no matter what the
quickly answer that.
Sure.
The Department of Homeland Security would never fund me. They might arrest me. I mean, it's silly. I mean, to think that journalism is going to take grants from the Department of Homeland Security. I don't know how that got in there. I don't know, but to think to hold up a discussion of what's a provocative and yes, risky endeavor over one line in one portion of a report that may have been unfortunate. I mean, I think we should be talking about the sort of the overall intellectual advantages and disadvantages of this, and not picking out one small thing like that. No, I couldn't possibly accept funding from the Department of Homeland Security. That would be ridiculous.
Let me bring up another issue, which is that of academic excellence. It's not only great that a really distinguished 68-year-old scholar got the Nobel for a work of a lifetime, a generation. It's also great that in the past 7 years, our physics department gets ranked number 10 among AAUP departments in its area. And when I looked at the humanities, I don't say this because I think that department's more important than, for example, languages, because I don't. But there's one department that could be moved, like physics was, to top 10. Can't remember. Philosophy. Philosophy is in a situation where we could make that a top 10 AUP university, and it seems to me with a lot less money than it took to move physics there. I mean, we all know that, too. I hate to say it, you're cheaper than a physicist. Yeah, exactly. And it seems to me that's an argument I don't see taking place. It seems to me we should be moving money. I agree with you, not on a head-to-head basis, but one of them is what departments can we move to, top 10 AAUP? I'm being too precise. Arguments like that. And that's what I don't see. That's what I see missing from this discussion.
Well, again, so it'd be a great discussion to have. It's kind of like responsibility-centered management. It was not the charge of the faculty group that wrote the ICJMT report to talk about the way in which resource allocation on the campus is made. They were asked to try to define a intellectual and educational enterprise in a particular area. But these conversations occur all the time. I mean, I can tell you one of the places they occur is on the program review committee, and the faculty is quite divided, in fact, over whether ranking systems should drive any decisions on campus. And there's a fair number of faculty who do not believe in the ranking systems and think that using those rankings are a abuse of our resources. So I think we should have a conversation about that, but I don't think I'm not certain we're going to have unanimity about the measurements, particularly now. I mean, we may or may not be aware that there will probably never be another NRC ranking. I mean, I assume that's what you're referring to as the National Research Council rankings. They're kind of out of the business of this. The rankings are more or less being handed off to a private operation, Academic Analytics, which our institutional analysis office has kind of helped try to improve their product. If you saw their initial runs from about 6 years ago, their results were kind of laughable. They now claim to be able to provide up to the minute rankings of units. We're on an experimental basis releasing the academic analytics rankings of social science departments as part of this program review cycle. And we'll see whether our social science departments, who amongst other things are experts in statistics and rankings and use of data, whether they look at this and find these plausible or not. Again, it's like with any of these kinds of things, it can sound great, that's a great way to make decisions, but there are institutions now that are using academic analytics data to make personnel decisions. So you have an offer from another university, and they'll run an analysis whether your leaving the university will make a difference in the ranking of the unit, and if it doesn't make any difference, they'll say goodbye. Now, if you think that's a good idea,
Didn't you like Moneyball?
I think Lisa and then Helmut and then I'm going to have to go.
Would you like to go?
I just wanted in general to say that we in the summer try to keep that in mind. That is excellent, and the opportunity that we have to, through marshalling some of these resources into units that are very close to a high ranking, and that should drive our thinking about this. Let me just say one thing is that have you paid much attention to the fact that if a new unit were to be constructed and its name was college, that it wouldn't redouble the barriers to work between. So is this also an occasion for us to rethink how we have students and faculty flow between colleges, which by now is a very problematic process?
Yeah, it's a great question, and the answer is yes. I mean, so, and somewhat part of this process somewhat independently, but to take one example, when Journalism Plus was proposed as a way of taking the degree in journalism and aligning it with an arts and sciences degree. It could have been other degrees, but largely with arts and sciences degrees. We ran up against a rule. So we sat down and figured out that students could, in 120 hours, complete their journalism degree, complete the arts and sciences core, and get a major in an arts and sciences department. But we have a rule that says you have to carry 154 hours if you are going to take a double major. So we did not allow the journalism students to take a double major, even though they are in fact completing a double major. It says, I can't remember what the term of art is. Do you remember what it is? An allied field? No, it's not dual degree. It's an allied field, or I don't know. It says on their transcript that they have all the courses in economics, but it doesn't say they have a degree.
Alternative field of study.
Alternative field of study. So we then tried to figure out who's told us we had to have 154 hours for double majors. It ends up, no one told us that we had to have. We told ourselves that's obviously at some point, it's the maximum number of hours that would be covered under state funding. It's the maximum number of student credit hours, so I'm assuming that's where it came from. But the Dean's Council has pretty much decided they're eliminating that. They haven't made a final decision. So instead of having a barrier to students working in two different schools or colleges, there would then be agreements reached about how this would work. It'd obviously be different if you're trying to major in engineering and music than if you're trying to major in journalism and economics. So that's just one example, but the movement of faculty, the way in which faculty appointments are done, these are all, we've operated under long-standing processes that are there for reasons that sometimes we don't understand. So I think any good ideas people have about breaking down barriers, people want to listen to. Again, I think that part of the fear always becomes is what impact does this have on long-term resource decisions? And I think part of that fear is we don't actually have a clear model of resource allocation. That is, we have historical resource allocations. That is, there are historical budgets in schools and colleges and beyond that in departments. And then we have marginal investments that are made when there are budget increases. But we don't have a theory of how we budget. We can look at universities that have them and we can say they're good or bad. But we're kind of doing it more by ad hocery. So I think that produces a lot of anxiety and therefore is one block to people thinking about more creatively about sharing things.
Lisa, now I gotta go.
Yeah, so, one of the external reviewers that came from the University of Kansas, he was director of the Center for Humanities there. This was in the RPAC review of the division, came from a place where they had a concept of the commons. And I say this because I'm having a lot of tension over new budget models that are being thrown around within the College of Arts and Science as a unit that is not a traditional unit. And even before they were being thrown around, there was always we don't quite know how to handle budgeting needs of units that don't fit one of these other kinds of units. And so again, it raises the issue in my case of should we stay in the college if there is no method developed to deal with the budget issues of my particular unit. And so one possibility is we could be in graduate school like the other museum. There's other ways that the money could be given to the college and flow through to us, and all of this could be weighed. I say that this idea of the commons there was the library, the Museum of Art, and the Center for the Humanities. And so they were constructed as things that had a bigger campus mission beyond the college, or any one college, and that could do distinct things and could also do dynamic things together, which is probably already happening here, but we don't have a structure, we don't have a support. This is really about significant excellence that cannot be measured in these kinds of studies.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think, for historical reasons, we have placed almost everything on campus under a dean. We're a dean-centric organizational, organized university, and other universities do things differently. Long ago, when I was working with the libraries, in a committee on the libraries, we recommended what lots of major universities do, which is to take the library out of the school and college budget debate and the provost budget it directly. This kind of idea of it's a common asset. So I think an important conversation to have. Push it.
That's what I'm doing. Thank you.
I'm sorry I've got to leave, but Helmut, I've got to go hear some wonderful speakers. If you want to move on from here, Center for British and Irish Studies, great stuff on book history. Dr. Frazee will take over here.
So unlike Jeff, I haven't been involved in the process, so my job here is just to make sure that one person speaks at a time. That's about it.
Well, the one other issue I might add to the mix is I attended part of the kickoff for social studies program review. And Brian Taylor from Communication gave one of the few, I would say, eloquent statements, not only of what his department did, but how it and social sciences function in this university when they work, which is education for citizenship. And that was something where I thought, this is someone describing an arts and science department. And so I think that's another, I'm not saying this as a conversation closer, but just as another issue, is that communication does function inside the social sciences, inside arts and science, in a very positive way. So we certainly would want to be sure that there was an improvement when it's moved into the new either college or whatever.
I have a question. I'm leaning on what I read in the ICJMT steering committee report, and haven't been at this university for terribly long. But when I just think really plainly about what my station is here, and I work in the Department of Art and Art History, and I think about the pairing or the projected pairings of these various schools, various areas, various departments, the thing that it relates most closely to me relates to my history at another school where I was at an art and design school, and there was a lot of discussion of technology, a lot of discussion of the digital, a lot of discussion of mass communication, and we ran into a terrific amount of problems there when there was a lot of mixing of those two things. As a case in point, I ended up having frequently a lot of students that were working on from this client-based model that was more of something like a vocation where they're accustomed to problem solving for other people, working on assignments but not generating pure completely independent lines of thoughts the way we do. I feel like more so as practitioners in our area. So when I came here, I kind of liked that separation. So I think there's been a lot of discussion at these meetings about the reticence that faculty have moving forward. And for me, it's kind of personal in that it relates really clearly to a lot of problems that I had at that old art and design school, where it was art, design, digital communications, and there was continually this justification of here, specifically in the fine arts, painting, how are these students going to get a job? Where's the money come back into the school? And then over here, graphic design, digital this, mass communications that potentially does have jobs. And it was constantly the case that I felt as though in our area at that school, we were always under fire to justify what our mission was and to justify how we contributed to this loosely liberal arts-based program. And so I see something like this as being a little nerve-inducing in that when I went back and looked at the other fora that were had and the other discussions, there's continually this thing that's said about we don't know what it's going to be. We don't know anything. That it's open-ended. We can't compare it to anything. When the language from the ICJMT steering committee makes me very closely compare it to something that I'm familiar with. And so that's just something I wanted to voice. And would love a response if that was a talking point for anybody.
No, I think you're right that the ICJMT document gives a very strong impression that we've got to sort of make these units which are slated to go into this new college, we've got to sort of make them more relevant and productive. It's interesting that, I mean, I did a word count on it, and although it talks about the arts and it mentions digital media hundreds of times and technology hundreds of times, there's not a single mention of any of the traditional media. There's no mention of painting, there's not a single reference to drawing, ceramics, poetry, any of the traditional arts, drama. There's one mention of musical performance and it comes in a phrase that goes like this: innovative new methods for innovative new recording methods for interesting new innovative performances or something like that. One time musical performance gets mentioned in the whole document. So I think that the impression that you get from it is very definitely there. And it should make you nervous.
Yeah, to respond, I was doing a buzzword count also. I stopped after a while. The steering committee came to our department and we had a discussion with them. And I think some of us, it wasn't me at the time, but there were some teachers that were tasking them with how they may have been generalizing about our area as we were extrapolating that generalization out of that report. And somebody on the committee, it's a little unfair saying this because they're not here, but somebody on the committee said that they saw a BFA degree in the art department as being equivalent to a vocational degree. And a quick comment from somebody like that was part of the generating committee gives me a sense that they really are kind of pretty far afield from understanding what we do and understanding what my interests are in the classroom to respond to you.
So I've been a science and environmental journalist for 30 years, and I want to tell a story because that's what we do, is tell stories. We ran a conference on climate, on culture, politics, and climate change, and there was a presentation by an art student where she shared her ceramic installation. And she had started out in life as a biology major, marine biology, but decided to move to art. And in some sense try to take what she had internalized from her world and her life as a biology student into her art. And what she did was make, through her ceramics, a sort of life-size portion of a coral reef. It was an astonishing piece of work. We didn't see it in person. She showed images of it. But from what I gathered from it is that you can come up to this installation, you can immerse yourself in it. At the bottom of it was a healthy coral reef, vibrant colors, beautiful. And as you move toward the top, it was bleached because we're getting coral reefs around the world are dying from climate change and other human impacts. And through this incredible installation, she had, in some sense, encapsulated an aspect of human domination of our planetary life support systems in a way that I have been unable to do as a journalist for 30 years covering this story. And she described herself as a scientist artist, and I said, well, why not think of yourself as sort of a journalist artist? In some sense, you're following, you're doing this as pure art, which has a huge impact, and it's based on many of the things that my work is based on. So this is the point that I'm trying to make. When we take out like all of the stuff that drives us crazy about this, the World Bank and Homeland Security, which is crazy, the fact that that painting was mentioned once or maybe not at all those things are problems. There's no question. But I guess what I would say is, what can we envision from a different grouping of units that would be inspiring, like this work was inspiring to me? I mean, I never saw a connection to fine art in this way before. It blew my mind.
I'd like to ask a question pertaining to that, which is what's stopping that from happening right now?
Well, that's a very good question.
And there isn't anything stopping it right now. To spend $1 million to $1.5 million creating a new department so we can do things we're already doing, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, that's a good question, to which I would respond, why aren't we doing it?
We are already doing, but it's up to you and it's up to the department to get together and make these things happen. There's nothing to stop us from doing it right now. In the College of Arts and Sciences, why don't you join Arts and Sciences?
Oh my God, there's a can of worms.
Just come on in. We don't need a new school, we've got a great one already.
I mean, I just wanted to, acknowledge that point, because that's an excellent one. We, in our department, we actually looked at the numbers to see what kind of basically double and triple majors our students were doing. And what we found so interesting is, I don't have the numbers right off the top of my head, I did them last semester, but that it's at least, 30%? I remember I gave these numbers, at least 30, 40%. And the thing is, there's no one way you can say that they all major in this area, or they all major in that area, they all major in this other area. And in fact, one of the curious things that I did in part of this sort of looking at all the numbers, even though we're technically not numbers people, is that if you look at all the different majors that most of our students go into, there's true diversity. If you look at the majors that are identified in the college that is sort of proposed in the ICJMT, it's less than like 1% of our students. So our students are not double majoring in mass communications, in journalism, at the same levels that they are in other areas. What were the other sort of journal? What were the other? I'm trying to remember the other ones I pulled out from the departments that are highlighted in actually that report. And so I think that some of the issues that our department has had with that report is that, we're all behind all the sort of cross-disciplinary approach, providing, that's an excellent example of what we hope our students are doing, that they're applying what it is they're doing in the disciplines that we teach to other areas, and that they're actually, omnivorous in their approach to information and into experiences.
Right.
But we don't want to narrow it, and what we perceive the college is doing, at least this definition of the college as presented in that report, is narrowing that off, what that possibility is. And it's hard to get around that from the language. I mean, even if you remove, say, certain buzzwords, like how many times, if we're keeping some crib sheet, sculpture is mentioned, painting is mentioned, photography is mentioned, even if you eliminate that, the conceptual basis for it is still around a lot of things that in our department, which we're sort of foregrounded as an important department in this new college, we don't feel kinship to. And it's not what our students necessarily feel kinship to. So we would love for our students to continue that kind of cross-disciplinary approach, but we need to let them have as open access to the university as possible and to College of Arts and Sciences as possible, rather than relegating it to something that's much more specifically defined, and then saying these are the kinds of students we would prefer to have. So.
I just want to offer a huge amen to what you just said, because what I'm going to take away from this conversation in the past hour is, in a very general sense, whatever the administrative configuration of this new thing is, it's going to tick off a whole bunch of people on campus. And I don't want that to distract from what I consider to be the real goal, is to enable faculty members who want to form combinations in new ways, and students who want to formulate a course of study in a new way that hasn't. If we can just break down those silos, whatever the current or future administrative structure of all of these various colleges is going to be, if we can break down the silos and create more permeable membranes between our academic units, that is really what's going to enable us to move forward.
I'm just assuming as we are exchanging some stories, I wanted to add my story to the mix, which is I graduated from CU. And when I started at CU, I entered in a certain program. I don't want to get into the details because I just wasn't happy with the program. I didn't feel like I was learning. And I said, well, why am I at the university? And so I flung myself into every class possible. Biology, which I did horrible in. And I just took a little bit of everything. And the one area where I felt I was learning the most was in humanities. And so I changed my major to humanities. And then within humanities, I started to learn so much within the film department because of the artists that were there and because of the vision, the vibrant vision within that department, that I then became a double major as a humanities and film major. And of course I had to endure all the jokes of people who never get a job and all that kind of stuff. I ended up getting a job working for cable TV, no problem, had a great time there. But I had such a good time. I learned so much at this school. I spent 6.5 years as a student here. And you can't really do that now. But I just want to say that from my perspective, the concern that I have is the language is so vote-techie oriented right now in terms of where it's going. And I worry about the dynamic departments and their artists being bleached of their passions by this kind of board-like vote-tech approach that blends everything together. And I could be completely off base here, but I'm just giving you my perspective as someone who graduated from here as a student. If I think of myself as an incoming student, I would be sort of put off by this kind of vote-techie approach. I would rather be going into these different departments and being fed passionately by different professors. So my 2 cents, just a little story about that. Yeah.
Anybody else?
I guess because I'm in journalism, I think that when we talk about vote-techie, maybe we're referring to journalism. And just as a point of information, as an accredited journalism program, we absolutely refuse to allow our students to take more than 1/3 of their undergraduate credits in journalism because it's so important for them to have a well-rounded liberal education. And that's what distinguishes us from the true vocational journalism programs that are out there at other colleges, other institutions.
I just wanted, you guys are representative, you're in journalism.
Well, we're here.
A couple of you are here. And you don't have to speak for the whole program, but can you speak for the whole program? We've only had the opportunity to meet one person in journalism, and that was the person in the steering committee. And and I actually haven't heard the voices from some of the other faculty in journalism and their appraisal of the proposal. I'm just curious, what's the discussion you guys have had, you folks have had about the proposal and how you feel about it? And you may have a particular point of view, but I'm just curious if you can represent a little bit of the diversity of the program, faculty.
So I came back from my spring sabbatical when the report came out. So, this is Hunchik. Do you get a sense of what colleagues have been saying around the halls? Because you know what, there hasn't been an honest to God formal, let's meet at this time and discuss that ICJMT proposal.
Interesting.
Was there? I was on sabbatical, but
I just don't want to, totally change the topic of the discussion and the directions as well. But and I don't represent, general consensus among my colleagues, including Paul. We were doing fine. The university just decided to discontinue us, and it was a total shock. And now we are here after 2 years. And I still don't know why the School of Journalism has been discontinued. We have all the justification and all kinds of techy words about journalism is changing, print journalism is failing. But have you heard of any other school of journalism and mass communication in the United States discontinued by the university, especially the members of the AAUs? We are the only one. So, well, to make a long story short, we were doing fine, but it was just a political decision. And we are just trying to continue what we used to do, strong. Students are very much interested continuing journalism and mass communication studies. But now we are in a very awkward situation, trying to find some allies, and the university is trying to group different units. And I think it's good because, I mean, journalism, one of our classic scholars in the 1950s defined our discipline as the crossroads of all the disciplines. So we need input from other disciplines, and we are very much flexible. So, I mean, I understand there are some concerns and even some hatred, animosity among some of the faculties at different colleges. I think it is great to have something new, and we are happy to have, all the other academic units with different faculty from different orientation, different training. The problem is, people from other fields may have, those clearly defined fences that, oh, you guys just screw up, in other towns, and you are just trying to hovering and trying to find new neighbors. That's something that I found also very shocking. As much as I was very shocked when I heard this continuous decision from the university. So the reason I was mostly quiet and never even tried to say anything was, okay, I mean, I'm ready for anything, and I'm willing to accept some of the new, hybrid. By the way, I like riding my hybrid bikes. So.
I was going to say, one of the things that it seems like, I mean, when you think about really impactful schools of journalism, is their commitment to sort of citizenship and the way in which they sort of educate a populace, right? And again, in the context of that proposal, I didn't see that language. I mean, for journalism, like for all the hopes that I have, how important journalism is now. I don't know, and so I'm curious if your program saw
you
that.
have a better answer, but we did include those, democracy and the citizens.
No, but in the ICJMT proposal? That's what I'm saying, that I didn't see that kind of language, those things that seem so fundamental to practice.
The steering committee was
maybe
represented by a couple of JMC faculty, but who may have his own narrowly defined areas. I myself teach broadcast journalism and telecommunications, so obviously my areas of expertise is not represented, and also Paul has his own specialty. So,
I think we share in faculty a set of core values, and that the steering committee was so focused on looking out to bright, shiny new ideas that I think you're right. We didn't see much evidence of those core values that we really do hold on to very dearly.
Were you equally as surprised when the School of Journalism was going to be decommissioned?
The worst thing was that coincidentally, in our darkest days of the conversation of discontinuance, coincided with our reinspection for reaccreditation, and the fact that the undergrad program was still reaccredited, because they came in and inspected us and saw that on the ground we were providing all of the things that make up an accredited program, still doing that so well. The master's program is still in a provisional status, but the undergrad was reaccredited. And the other thing is that since those dark days of the first news of discontinuance, the study for discontinuance, our undergrad enrollment hasn't gone down, which is sort of, we're going, what? How is that possible? Are these students not reading the news? But no, that's a joke. That's a joke.
But there are a lot of art classes.
And that's the amazing thing, is that whatever else is happening, from the administrative point of view, the students see something interesting in the study of the media.
Oh, I find your response is curious and what a great opportunity. Thank you for asking that. Because I was trying to understand why that happened, and I was recently reading some of the reports for the decommissioning. I don't even know if that's the right word. Discontinuance. Yeah. And they said it was very jargony. I couldn't understand it, but it kept talking about this flawed administrative structure, and I didn't understand what that is. And I would imagine if you guys were in that school, you must have felt that if it was worth.
Well, not to get too personal or anything, but I was the flawed administrative structure, and I kept wondering, why didn't somebody just fire me and just continue the school? If the dean is not doing his job, there are other ways. But that didn't happen. Instead, the school was discontinued. So,
that sounds extreme.
From the comments from the faculty from the journalism school, it strikes me that, there might be two issues here. One is that, what's the best structure for a school of journalism that makes it possible for the students to do all the other things they need to do to be good journalists, or whether they're going to be journalists or not?
Right.
And it's clear that just from the point of view of training a journalist, they need a lot of stuff. There are a lot of different ways you could be a good journalist. One thing would be you could know something about science. How many good journalists are there out there who know something about science? Well, there's probably a few, but often one gets the feeling that they don't know enough science. Or mathematics. It would be good if journalists in general knew fundamental mathematics so that they couldn't be bamboozled by politicians as much as they are. So, it seems to me that what the journalism school needs from that point of view is to be located in a unit and in a structure that allows that kind of interchange and allows students to do as much as they can outside the journalism school. So I don't know why the reaction to the idea of journalism being within arts and sciences was so tentative before. Why couldn't the School of Journalism be located within arts and sciences and be a part of that? Would that be a problem for accreditation?
Absolutely not, because most accredited programs are either departments or schools
within a college,
and usually it is the College of Arts and Sciences. So that's not an issue at all.
No sort of principal objection to that kind of restructuring of journalism, or is there?
Maybe somebody said something before I came in a little late, so I'm not quite sure what you're referring to.
Well, somebody suggested you can come into the School of Arts and Sciences, welcome, and he said, "Wow, that opens up a can of worms," and laughed. The guy who's sitting there.
I think one of your colleagues talked earlier. Sorry.
Tom, yeah, and he is a member of the journalism faculty. Not really.
So that doesn't reflect a general sentiment that somehow journalism would not fit in to a broad liberal arts college.
I don't want to speak for others, but as the dean of the smallest school on campus, I lived through some limitations that come with autonomy. We were talking about autonomy several minutes ago, and one of the great perks of autonomy is that you're on your own for fundraising constantly. It's a constant battle for resources. It's difficult to compete when you're the smallest school on campus for campus resources, and it's difficult to staff up for external fundraising. There are others, Grant, who maybe are nostalgic for the prestige of being an autonomous school, because look at our aspirational peers, okay, and they're all either colleges of journalism or colleges of communication or autonomous schools, and maybe that, I don't know, that might have something to do with it. But I better stop speculating.
No, that was helpful, thanks, because I don't think it's one of the named programs. It's not a position. I mean, we didn't hear from too many other colleagues. I mean, we've heard from film and theater because there are cognitive units, but we haven't heard really from journalism. And we've spoken with Ryan a little bit about from communications, and there was another. Who was it? Who was in the summer meeting? There was another.
Yeah. Forgiveness.
Faculty in the summer meeting, a very different position.
Peter Sons?
Yeah.
Peter Sons?
Yes, I think so. So it's helpful for us to even just hear this.
There are some colleagues at the Shorenstein Center at Harvard who have been promoting this concept called the journalism of expertise. Mm-hmm. And I think that the greatest single thing that has come out of this agony that we've been going through in the last 2 years in our program has been the development of Journalism Plus, because it moves our students so much closer to this. And, you know, the journalism of expertise is really more geared toward a graduate level of journalism study, but still, the concept to inculcate at the undergraduate level that it's great to have the techniques that will get you a job, but how great is it also to have an area in which you know what you're writing about. If you want to weigh in, I mean, you may have some different ideas.
I just don't want to leave the impression to some of you that journalism created all this. We are just trying to see and anticipate what's ahead. And some of the proposed ICJMT is actually, journalism is just a tiny little element. So whatever the new entity is being created, I mean, what I can say, representing only myself, not my colleagues, is just, I'm just excited about the new possibility. Because since we are a much smaller entity right now, and I'm just open to, if there is a university level effort driving us to creating some new state-of-the-art college, then I'll be happy to be a part of it. It's not just, since our former house is gone, so we are looking for a new house. No, I don't think so. We might be happy to be, a small program as it is right now. But if there is a university level effort, then I'll be happy to join. That's all I can say. Okay. So other departments and other, the units at the university, if they concur with, some of the values and some of the possibility presented by the university, and I think it's a great opportunity. Yeah, that's all I can say.
Can I just, one closing, I won't say anything more after this, but I wanted to respond one more time to Graham. The only thing that would really worry me about journalism joining arts and sciences would be, and this goes to what I had said several moments earlier, we as faculty members and on behalf of our students, we need more open access to the computer science department and the School of Business for those who see their scholarship and training going in those directions. And so if going to A&S would build a huge, a thicker wall around A&S to prevent that, I would have a problem with that. But we're going to end up in some kind of larger unit. Either that or we will be vaporized and let CSU teach journalism in the state of Colorado. Of course, we don't want that. And so my concern is that we really do sort of have open doors to the new places where we need to be. And I think units like the ceramicists in fine arts also recognize new places where they need to be, for example.
We have time for one or two more comments.
I haven't said anything, so I'll probably just follow up on that, though, so there's a response to you. With the journal, and I'm Steve. I'm program director of the digital media program and an adjunct instructor.
journalism. And it strikes me that the Journalism Plus program is wonderful. The theme in journalism, the trend in journalism is that journalists have to be more specialized. They can't be journalists anymore. But what Paul just said about the connection, the interactions with business and technology, computer science, at least in my mind, and again, I'm a digital media guy, I think that is even more important than having that available than all of the other interactions where people can become specialty journalists, because the journalism industry is frankly in crisis and doesn't seem to be any way out yet. So it's up to us, the universities, to help the industry figure that out, at least in my view. So I guess I'll stop there.
Right. Well, thank you all for coming, and these comments have all been recorded and will be available. And is there another?
No, this is the last one of these. Now the proposals, people doing proposals will start to carry on with that work. Those are due before the spring semester, and then the next sort of event around this will be the external review, which will happen at some point in February. I don't think, as Jeff said, I don't think those dates have been set yet.
Will faculty members get a chance to have a sort of a group meeting with the external reviewers?
I think there's conversation about how, I don't know how many days that is set up to be, but I think there will be that kind of opportunity.
I think that's pretty typical.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy your weekend.